Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be reading from the Mafia series by Christian McCory. It is actually my favorite book in the entire world. When he had first gotten it, it had been an injury that nearly killed him. The man who had attacked him with the sharp end of a broken bottle had been caught soon after. A low-level thug who made the mistake of attacking the wrong guy. His name had been Finnegan. Now he was nothing more than a bloody pulp stain on the concrete floor of the boss's office. In the days that followed, he had looked at himself in the mirror and seen the damage that had been done. There was still a small divot in his cheek where the glass had hit him, and when he smiled, a faint line could be seen beneath his skin, a constant reminder of what had happened to him. The irony was not lost on Eddie. He was a man who now inflicted pain and suffering on others, yet he still carried the wounds of his past. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message to anyone who might think of crossing him, to anyone who might try to hurt those he cared about. Whatever it was, Eddie wouldn't trade it for the world. This was his life now. This was his story. The scar now ran from the corner of his eye, down the bridge of his nose, cutting into his upper lip, and then disappearing under his neatly trimmed beard. In 20 years, he became one of the most powerful men in the organization. His rise to power was marked by blood and betrayal. He had eliminated rivals, taken out informants, and silenced anyone who threatened his position. He had a reputation to uphold, after all, the reputation of the monster with the scar. Maybe it was the scar that made him who he was. Maybe it was the pain. Or maybe it was the strength he had found within himself to keep going even when all hope had seemed lost. Whatever it was, Eddie wouldn't trade it for the world. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps out a lot. Consider subscribing so you never miss an upload. I truly appreciate all of your support. Even his closest allies couldn't help but be a little afraid of him. They knew that he was capable of anything, that he would do whatever it took to protect his own. You don't mess with a man who had a scar to prove it. As he watched the body being dragged away, Eddie couldn't help but smile. He could charm the pants off a nun or intimidate a bishop. He was a force to be reckoned with, a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. He was a monster, yes, but he was his own kind of monster. He was a monster, yes, but he was a monster who had risen from nothing to become everything he had ever wanted to be. He was a monster who had survived the worst that life had to offer and come out the other side. And as long as he had breath in his lungs, he would keep fighting for what he believed in, no matter how dark things got. He had a reputation to uphold, after all, the reputation of the monster with the scar. He was a monster with a heart, a monster with a code, a monster with a story to tell. They were cursed to repeat the mistakes of their fathers, doomed to a life of violence and bloodshed. But Eddie wasn't going to let his past define him. He was going to make something of himself, even if it meant leaving the only family he had ever known behind. So if you like my voice, the way that I read, or this type of content, please subscribe so you can be notified every time I upload a new video. The one scar that Edward had held a very dark backstory was located on his left cheekbone. It was shaped like a claw mark. All that was left of Finnegan was a pair of eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, devoid of any life or recognition. But that didn't mean he had forgotten about the pain that had been inflicted on him. That didn't mean he hadn't thought about revenge. No last-minute pleas for mercy. No dignity or respect given. Not that it would have mattered. The attack on Eddie had happened years ago, before he had joined the family. There had been too many people there that night, and none of them had wanted to get involved. They let Finnegan do what he wanted until he went too far. The wound had bled profusely, staining the front of his shirt crimson. And with every strike, more blood had seeped out, blurring his vision. He remembered collapsing onto the floor, the taste of blood and vinegar heavy in his mouth. He had been just another face in the crowd, a nobody. The attack itself had not been personal. It had been senseless, vicious, and brutal. The club where the attack happened was called the Rusty Nail. It was a dive bar in Little Italy, known for its strong drinks and even stronger clientele. There had been a fight that night, a simple barroom brawl over some cheap beer and a pretty little thing. The fight had taken a turn when some outsiders had stepped in and decided to lay some beatings of their own. When Eddie had come to the aid of a couple of guys from the neighborhood crew, they had jumped him, breaking the bottle over his head and leaving the shard lodged deep in his cheek. There were others who had witnessed the attack, but no one had stepped in to help. He had woken up in the hospital with a bandage over his eye, the pain of the injury still fresh. Even now, all these years later, the wound had not fully healed. But that was the life they chose, the men who lived and died in the Mafia. He had chosen the latter. It stayed with the family and become everything they had taught him to be. Powerful, feared, and respected. Now as he stood in the shadows watching the hit play out, he felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that justice had been served. You don't mess with a man who had already survived the worst that life had to offer, who had stared death in the face and come out the other side. Maybe it was the scar that made him who he was. Maybe it was the pain. Or maybe it was the strength he had found within himself to keep going, even when all hope had seemed lost. And as long as he had breath in his lungs, he would keep fighting for what he believed in, no matter how dark things got. From the age of 16, Edward had worked his way through the ranks of the Genovese crime family. His ruthlessness was legendary.
Ow.
His enemies often found themselves dead without a trace, their families left to wonder what had happened to them. He was a master manipulator, able to read people's minds and exploit their weaknesses. As he stood in the shadows of the cathedral, watching the funeral procession pass by, he couldn't help but smile. He was a monster who had a heart, a monster who had a code, a monster with a story to tell. This was his life now. This was his story. Thank you so much for listening to me read this Mafia excerpt.